Hello, and welcome to this episode of In Discussion With from Medical Update Online. Today, I'm talking to Dr. Richard Vautrey about making primary care services seamless and effective. Please, could you start by introducing yourself?
I'm Dr. Richard Vautrey. I'm a GP in Leeds, and I was the former president of the Royal College of General Practitioners and a former chair of the BMA's GP committee.
And can you give us a brief overview of your role, what your current job involves?
GPs are at the forefront and on the front line of the NHS. They will see patients on a day-to-day basis, often on a 10 or 15 minute or even quicker consultation rate. So seeing large numbers of people, speaking to large numbers of people each and every day, from the very young, seeing young children sort of, with their parents, through to the elderly and those who are living with long-term conditions, those who are reaching the end of their life. It's a great privilege being a GP, and whilst we see large numbers of patients, we often don't necessarily know what an individual patient is going to bring with them to the consultation. So it can be a real challenge each and every consultation. So it's a very difficult job, difficult to identify those patients who have conditions where the symptoms are just emerging, as opposed to those who've got long-term conditions where you're managing conditions that are mainly well known. So it's something that's a real privilege to be, but it's a real challenging job to do and to do well.
Now, you recently spoke at the NPA Community Pharmacy and General Practice Conference, where you emphasised the importance of a seamless service for patients. Could you start by telling us what you meant by this and how you would like it to work from the patient's perspective?
Patients expect the service that they receive from their GPs, from their pharmacists, to be seamless. They assume that we have access to the same information and that when a prescription is issued, the pharmacist should be able to dispense it without any difficulty. And in many cases, that is the case. And increasingly, with electronic prescribing, that has become so. Where rather than having to handwrite, as I used to have to do, sort of a prescription, and then print out a prescription, now it's sent electronically, direct from the GP to the pharmacist, and we would hope that the pharmacist is then able to dispense it promptly, and the patient is able to access it seamlessly. And that's particularly the case when there's a good relationship between the practice and the pharmacy. And we often see pharmacies based in GP surgeries or close to GP surgeries. And in those cases, you can get a really good relationship developing between practice and pharmacy. And you would hope that patients then see that combined service as their local healthcare service, and that they ensure that the same messages that they get from the GP are the same messages that they get from the pharmacist, and vice versa.
How will the 10-year health plan for England help to improve the situation?
Well, it's still too early to know for sure. The rhetoric sounds good. The rhetoric of investing in the community, of neighbourhood healthcare services, of moving services from hospitals into the community is one that many of us would recognise as being long overdue, but it has to follow with the resources to make that sustainable, both for general practice and for community pharmacy. For many, many years, the community-based services, including community nursing services, have been overstretched and underfunded. And to enable good quality neighbourhood care to develop, we do need to see real investment in the community to actually ensure not only that the existing service is sustainable and delivers what patients need and want, but also future developments are done in a way that are sustainable as well. And we would hope that we can see that increased opportunity for prevention, for supporting patients with long-term conditions, for treating more conditions within a community setting, working closer with our colleagues in secondary care in a community setting as well, particularly for more long-term conditions. We're seeing increased development of services, such as cardiology or dermatology or ENT, community gynecology. The list is endless as to what could be done in a community setting, but it needs the right support. but it also needs investment in our premises, because many of our practices, many community pharmacists could and would want to do more, but are limited by the size of their premises. So we do need long-term investment, not just in our workforce, but also in the premises, so that we can ensure our patients who have got increasing needs get those needs delivered by their community-based teams.
The plan foresees a transition to a digitally led model. What will or should this involve in practice?
Well, we've already seen that happening for many years. General practice has been at the forefront of digital records, and many years ahead of hospital colleagues. We've seen the implementation of electronic prescribing, which has really revolutionised the way that we can support our patients. I remember the days when my patients were on holiday in different parts of the country. They would have to find a local GP if they had a particular need. Now they'll often ring up and I can get a prescription to them within minutes to wherever they are within England. So there's some real changes that have happened already. And we're increasingly seeing patients using the NHS app, looking at their records online, and the accessibility of information where patients are, and increasingly for pharmacists to have access to information as well. It's really supporting healthcare in the round. But we also need to be really mindful that our patients' data is precious. They expect it to be held in confidence. And so we need to ensure that any systems that are built ensure that patients continue to have confidence that their GP, their pharmacist, and anybody else who's caring for them will look after their data and will preserve its confidentiality.
And the plan also calls for greater emphasis on preventive care, especially obesity and smoking. How will this work in practice, and what are the practical implications?
Everyone wants to provide preventive care. We want to avoid some of the longer term conditions that we're increasingly seeing develop and becoming more prevalent. We see that particularly with diabetes, with more and more patients struggling with the consequences of living with diabetes. And underlying that is the issue of obesity, and the weight of the nation as a whole seems to be increasing year by year. We now have very effective medication to treat and support people with weight management, but very limited because of its cost. And so there's great frustration amongst many of our patients who are living with weight issues, who know that a treatment is going to make a big difference to their lives if only it was available to them. And yet GPs are really frustrated that they're not able to prescribe and provide access to some of these newer treatments that will be effective for many of our patients. So there's real concerns that the investment for long-term preventative care is not there in the way that it ought to be. There's also an issue about how we join up more closely with local authority provided preventative services. Over the years, we've seen reductions in weight management, in smoking cessation services, drug and alcohol services, sexual health services, all of these really important services, but often provided and commissioned by local authority services, because they too have been under huge financial pressure over the last couple of decades. And as a result, some of the really valuable preventative services have been reduced or even removed in some cases. So we do need a wholesale long-term commitment to investment in preventative services, because that's the way that we reduce some of the NHS bills in the future.
And will wearables play a large role in future healthcare? How will this work?
I think it's too early to know for sure how effective and useful some of the wearable resources are. I mean, we know that already patients are able to monitor their blood pressure at home, and that can be a really useful way of assessing whether somebody has high blood pressure or whether their high blood pressure is controlled or not, because they're less anxious than when they come into the surgery or the pharmacy for a blood pressure check. But whether some of the other wearables, checking your pulse and and other parameters are particularly useful. Sometimes they can generate anxiety, rather than actually reduce it. But sometimes something very simple like a step counter in your phone can actually help to promote exercise, and particularly if people are setting themselves a target as to the number of steps that they're going to achieve on a day-to-day basis. That can be a really useful way of engaging patients and encouraging them to become more active in their life, which will long term be of real benefit to them and the future health.
Will we all, healthcare practitioners and patients, need to adjust our understanding and expectations of healthcare? And if so, how?
I think it's a really interesting question. I think the trend over the last 50 years, maybe longer, has been that more and more people are living with more and more long-term conditions, and there is more opportunity to manage those conditions with new medications and treatments and options, and also a patient expectation that they will be managed appropriately and will be able to live longer with these conditions has increased as well, understandably. And I think that's a reasonable thing that we should be trying to meet. But we do need the investment to be able to do that in a sustainable way. The level of investment the government will say into the NHS has increased year on year, which it has, but it's not been invested in the right places, particularly in the community, to ensure that we can provide that long-term support to our patients in the way that they need and rightly expect. So for expectations to be met, then we do need to have that investment, but we also need to have an understanding as a society about what our NHS can and should provide, but what is maybe more reasonable for others to either pay for or access in different ways. And we're increasingly seeing that with some of the much more expensive medications and drugs that are available. Some bespoke drugs, which can be very, very specialized, make a big difference to an individual, but are hugely expensive. So there's a real trade-off between benefit for individuals, benefit for society as a whole, and the cost of medications and treatments and investigations. So some real challenging discussions for future health secretaries, I think.
And now another question that affects all of us. How could we manage drug shortages better?
Yeah, this is a real issue for GPs and pharmacists and patients on a day-to-day basis. It's an issue that seems to be growing, not going away, and is largely related to the macroeconomics of where a drug manufacturer can get their most profits in different parts of the world. And when they can sell their medicines in one part of the world and not sell them to the UK or to the NHS, then we end up with a problem with supply. In some cases, it can be due to the manufacturing process that can lead to supply shortages, and that can be beyond the control of many of us. But in other cases, it is down to the amount that we're prepared as a nation to pay for our medicines, and whether we should be actually investing more in medicine production within the UK and ensuring that we, particularly for commonly used medicines, ensure that those medicines are readily available. The government really does need to take this much more seriously. We've heard them try to address it and put lip service to it. But it continues to be the bane of the life for many of our patients when all of a sudden their commonly used and essential medication becomes difficult to source, and many pharmacists really struggling to find it, and finding that they're then getting criticised by their patients and their customers as a result of not being able to supply medications to them. So it's a really difficult problem, but no easy solution without government intervention.
As a past chairman of the RCGP, you have a particularly good insight into the policy and delivery of primary care in England. So my final question is, do you have a closing message on behalf of frontline practitioners, GPs, nurses, pharmacists?
Yeah, I was president of the Royal College of GPs, which is more of an honorary role, but I was chair of the GP committee, which was much more involved in the day-to-day contract issues and representing GPs and their practices to government. And in both of those roles, what is very clearly evident is GPs want to do the best for their patients. Their practice teams working very closely with GPs, and increasingly that's the community team, including community pharmacists and others as well, are all working together on behalf of their patients in the community. But all of them are crying out for long-term sustained investment into their services. And by doing that, they can guarantee that they will be able to provide better services, higher quality services, much needed services to their patients, and by doing so actually reduce the impact on secondary care and society as a whole. So invest in the foundation, invest in the community-based services, and the patient and the nation will be better off.
Dr. Richard Vautrey, thank you very much for talking to us about this important topic. For more information about Dr. Vautrey's work, please visit the website using the links in the description, and be sure to subscribe for more news, videos, journals and podcasts. For updates straight to your inbox, please follow the links below. And thanks for watching.